Okay, everybody, we're here today with Mollie, who's a former staff member at several different institutions, and Candace, who does a show with me on Sunday nights. I forget what the name of the show is. What's the name of the show? Something Reform. Um, but do you remember the name of the show?
Yes.
What is it? uh,
I'm just going to let you sweat it out.
Okay, well, we'll figure it out by the end of the thing. We're here today, like I said, with Mollie. She's from the Dayton area. And Candace is going to ask some of the questions. What positions did you hold, Mollie, while you worked for the ODRC?
I started out as a food service coordinator. From there, I got involved in the union and became an officer. From an officer, I became a manager one in food service. From there, I became a director at Lebanon for the food service department. I was the prison PAM officer. I was on the RIB committees, and I also did DRMC policy.
So you were on the kangaroo committee?
Yes.
Pretty much. So were you a nice staff member?
No.
You weren't? Okay.
No.
Are you nice now?
No.
No? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
I hear she was tough but fair. Everybody knew where she stood. She didn't like stealing from the chow hall, so she probably wouldn't have liked me. But it's always interesting talking to people that was staff members because you hear a different perspective compared to an inmate side. Share a little bit about some of your experience on some of the things that you've seen over the years that you thought was unfair.
A lot of the things that I found that just the humiliation part of it. I worked for a male institution. This just demasculating of these young men or older men, where they don't really feel like they have anything except the negative way to go. So there's no positivity or interaction with staff. It's us against them mentality. And then when they act the way they're put in a position to do so, then they're further punished for it, which is counterproductive to anything that rehabilitation stands for. But the mentality is that they have all the programming in the world, and the programming is taken with a grain of salt because you don't have staff that enforces the same mentality as the programs are trying to put forth for these young men and women at women institutions. So if they get someone that has an ear and is willing to listen, willing to take the time one-on-one interaction, then that's frowned upon. But they don't have outlets. A lot of these guys don't have family members that are really in their ear constantly and helping them and taking care of them emotionally, mentally, and financially. So, I mean, it's a big problem because they want rehabilitation, but they're really not going about it in the right ways, and then the inmates are the ones that end up in the bad positions when they get released because they don't have anything productive.
Right. Candace has a few questions to ask too. You were at Mansfield at one time, right?
No.
No, you weren't at Mansfield?
No.
Okay. That's one of the institutions we have the most problems lately, especially gang-related and attacks. And Lebanon's pretty serious too. Why don't you share a little bit about what's happened at Mansfield, Candace, along, that she might be able to have some insight in it.
About my husband's attack?
Yes.
He was attacked on December 28th. He had boiling liquid thrown on him, and he obviously ran after the person and got thrown in the hole. Well, they all got thrown in the hole. Even the guy who stopped him from going after him, they all were thrown in the hole. And my husband got a ticket for fighting, even though he didn't touch the person. He was found guilty. They reviewed the tapes and know that he didn't touch him, but they said he perpetuated the fight by chasing after him.
Which most people would have done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they even told him that they would have done it, obviously, on record, but So then he was released back into general population, and along with the other two guys, they were all released back into general population, and we requested for him to be transferred out of the prison to another prison. We got static about that because he's been down for 25 years. The warden contacted me back, and we got like, I don't know what you would call it, but saying that my husband had been down for so long and had been in several high security institutions that he knew the protocol for it. However, he's never dealt with anything like this before, so he was unaware of what protective custody protocol was.
Your husband was unaware of what
Right.
protective? Okay.
Yeah, so he did request to look at the inmate handbook so that he could know. Finally, after we called up and complained, he was placed in protective custody to be transferred out. Basically, you know, well, I don't want to get into that, but anyways, so placed in protective custody, he's only allowed to be out 1 hour a day. They didn't allow him to have any type of property. They didn't give him his seg pack up.
Personal
he didn't-
hygiene.
Yeah, he didn't have a toothbrush or wasn't able to shower for days, and you know, treated like it was his fault. So we're waiting for him to be transferred out now.
Right.
We had to call up and speak with a lieutenant to get him any type of hygiene item. They're only allowed to be in a cage for an hour, 15 minutes on the JPay machine every other day. We have an actual open case where we aren't able to communicate back and forth about his open case. He can have none of his legal paperwork. The paperwork that his attorney sent him on December 14th, he's just now receiving. So there's, you know, we're stuck basically until he can get transferred out, and they're saying they're pushing for him to be transferred out sooner than later, but it's like they're backed up 5 months.
Yeah, they're hoping he was going to get transferred sometime in February, but we know that Lebanon's filled. Ross is pretty well filled.
They just don't have any place to put them.
They need a lower security then. There's plenty of room there. I mean, he's been down long enough, and he's, you know, he has not had any violence on his case since he's been down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 25 years convicted as a juvenile is ridiculous in the first place. And
So this is his first violence that he's had on his record, and he didn't even touch anybody.
but anybody that was
After he
locked
was
up,
attacked.
yeah,
Well-
anybody would run after that guy.
So a little insight, protective custody is also looked upon poorly by staff. They don't respect guys that do PC, and neither do inmates.
Well,
so
yeah.
He didn't have a choice if he wanted to be transferred out.
Yeah,
I
he would have
understand.
killed the guy if he didn't get transferred. You know, because it was either him or that guy. You know, and you know, and I would have felt the same way if somebody was possibly going to get me. I would get him first.
Right. Well, I mean,
Well, they
let's
said
not
his
go there.
they said his level of restraint was amazing. That because they watched the video and they told him his level of restraint was amazing, and asked him why did he stop. One, because he wants out. He wants to get out, and two, he has a wife that he has to deal with, and three, there was the guy was saying, you know, don't do this or whatever, and that guy got thrown in the hole. Obviously, he wasn't charged because he had nothing to do with it, but he did have to spend time in the hole until
Right.
it came to court.
But isn't his wife nice to deal with?
Me?
Yeah.
He told them one time he would rather lose his what did he say? He would rather lose his
Commissary.
than to have to listen to my mouth.
Well, I mean,
Well,
I understand
A
that.
couple of questions. So, he got his the ARs in the inmate handbook. That's one issue that I have a problem with the way DRNC does people coming in. They don't immediately go over ARs with them in depth. So they don't know the rules of the institution. They don't know the policies of the institution. They don't know their rights as an inmate. So that's one. That's a problem because then staff can do things that is not within DRNC policy and never be called out on it. So
That should be included in their handbook, though.
it should be part of coming into the institution. There should be an entire class that's a week or so long of orientation that explains ARs, what the rules are, and the procedures that need to be followed in order to ensure people are being held accountable for the rules. So that's one. The other part with him being in protective custody and being found guilty on that ticket, did he appeal the ticket?
Mm-hmm.
And
But we were told that they don't do paper appeals anymore, I guess. And
It's on JPay
it has to be
or
on
whatever.
JPay, correct?
and so there's no paper trail of if they appealed it to Columbus or not.
Well, if it's appealed through Columbus, it comes across on JPay. What he sends off he gets a log on JPay as well, so that JPay will have the accountability, and then they have 10 days to respond, and if they don't, they have to ask
when
for
they
an
don't have
extension.
access to JPay, then I don't know.
Well,
what
that's
to do.
another problem that I have with the institutions is some of these people are illiterate, some of these people can't type, they can't read, they can't write. No one
Right.
else can get on their JPay on their behalf to help write things up for them. So they're
The
in
machines are broken. I mean, they're broken half
right,
the time.
Machines go
They
down.
can be down for 2 weeks.
Now, I know
Correct.
nothing really about JPay.
And
They didn't have that
he's
when I
not
was
allowed
in.
to have his player, so
Right.
What player?
the
what's-
JPay player.
Oh.
So he
Correct.
has to get on the kiosk, but if the kiosk is
Right.
broken,
But they only have a certain amount of time, and it times out on them. They only have a certain amount of time. They only have a certain amount of characters. Now, if you're someone that's not used to typing, if you're somebody that doesn't read well, doesn't read fast, or can't put your words in a concise manner, everything that you put in for appeal is going to immediately be responded with a denial. And the first step for appealing anything is through the institutional inspector. And then from there, if you don't agree with their response, then it's on to central office.
Right. The first would be the informal complaint.
Correct.
And I don't even know. Well, the procedure is the same since I've been in, and they usually have between 10 and 14 days to respond back. I always tell people 14, but it must be 10 days. And then if you don't hear from them, then they go to the next step,
Right.
and then just keep going up. But let's switch the tone a little bit and talk a little bit about what's came out the last week and a half or so on the parole board with Shirley Smith's resignation and another gentleman who's kept quiet on his resignation. But how do you feel about Shirley Smith's resignation and her comments?
Well, I've read both of the articles that have come out on them. One through Dayton Daily News, and the other one I think is Columbus Dispatch that put it out. Well, I believe it's credible because what her complaints were has been something that inmates who dealt with the parole board have complained about excessively for numerous years. They don't pay attention. They're in disregard. They have the information incorrect. They don't care what their actual rehabilitation is. They revert back to the original crime, even if it's been 30 years.
Yeah.
And my understanding of the parole board is you cannot continue to use the crime. If you're really looking for rehabilitation, you have to see where's the progression of rehabilitation.
Well, we know the crime won't change, but people do.
Right, and
And-
so the crime cannot be undone. So to continuously bring it up, it has to be, this is what we expect of you, here's what we expect you to do the next time we see you, and there has to be, and I think they talk about super flops up to 10 years, 7 years.
But they stopped that for a while back in '94
Correct.
because they were giving 50-year flops.
Right.
Back then, I got a 9-year flop then, but then that was taken back when I went up for halftime.
And they don't do halftime anymore.
Right, they stopped that in '94 too, I
Yeah.
believe, or
Right.
'96
And
before
I think
'96.
halftime
In the 90s.
needs to come back because you can't give someone a halftime on anything over 5 years.
But they were giving us letters to say keep stepping it off is how they were doing it, unless they actually brought you up, which was very seldom.
Right, right. And well, because there's no accountability, there's no outside agency that's a liaison between the parole board and the inmate. And there needs to be, because both sides need to be held accountable.
Right. Well, they have two victim advocates sitting on the board, a psychologist and Miss Venters. And if they have that, we need to have an inmate advocate on. And I've been suggesting that for years. And I'm not talking about myself, but somebody that doesn't have a family member in, and it could be a former inmate that could speak on the behalf of the inmate and go talk to him and see if he's suited for parole.
Right. Well, we have a committee that you can do inmate complaints to an outside liaison.
Institution Inspection Committee.
Correct. But they seem really detached from everything, because and I've dealt with them before from inmates' complaints where they've come to me and said, this is what's going on and what do I do, and I've asked them to file with that committee.
Right.
But other than them just being informed, I don't see any more further action or reaction coming from them towards the institution.
Well, recently they've helped me out getting a guy transferred from Lake Erie from a PREA violation. Miss Adams is her name. She's the head of it. And she insisted that they transfer him. We sent an email, I think, on Candace's behalf to her as well. I don't know if she had anything to do with it. But if she doesn't walk through the institution, talk to the inmates herself, she really doesn't know what's happening.
Well, I know I filed 5 complaints to them on behalf of an inmate, one who'd been severely harassed from a staff person, and they actually threw feces on his bed. And
That's not good.
The officer was found guilty of it, yet that officer is still there. That officer, other inmates have come to this inmate and they have told him, they're out to get you, they're trying to set you up, they're going to plant stuff on you. And one inmate said that they came and took drugs from him and said, take your body shot and you won't get a ticket, and this is going to, and I won't say the inmate's name, blah, blah, blah. And as soon as I get my shot, it's going to that inmate. So he's going to plant these drugs on this inmate. And I mean, these are all things that have been substantiated.
But yeah, we've gotten so many complaints on that and about the feces as well.
This is staff to inmate, not inmate to staff.
Right.
And so that was reported to them numerous times, and I didn't even get a feedback. I didn't get a follow-up. I didn't get how are things going. I didn't get here's what we can do for you. So I'm really not sure, and maybe you've got more pull with them, but just the general person relaying information and making a complaint to them, where does it go and what happens with it? That's what I want to know.
A lot of times I
They
go through the
pick and
regional
choose.
director, which I got to know over the years, and some of them have helped us out and some just won't.
Right. Well, then what's the point of them? Because if they're not going to take every complaint to a position to where they check up on it or call an institution or speak with that inmate directly, then what is the purpose of that committee?
Well, you know pretty much the proper protocol. You start with the institution, the warden, work your way up. But we know the wardens usually think they have the greatest staff. Recently, we contacted Ed Voorhees at the ODRC about an office up at Dayton that sexual harassed women, making the women do stuff in front of him. I know to the institution inspector, I'm sure, Roger Wilson, and he said there's no truth to it. Our staff doesn't do stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and it's continuing today. I still remember the officer's name. I will not say it on here, but, you know, stuff like that needs to stop.
Right.
And it's happening in the men's prison, too. Men are getting caught up with the female SEALs because they're making moves on the inmate. And, of course, a guy that's locked up, you know, is not going to say no.
Right.
For the most part.
Right.
So, well, we're going to have to cut this short unless my phone's going to die out on here. But we'll talk a little bit more tomorrow night. Don't forget our show at 6 p.m.
The Voices of Reform.
The Voices of Reform. That's right. I remembered it. Voices of Reform. That's on our group page. 6 p.m. And next Saturday, we're going to probably have it on Saturday because of the Super Bowl, which really you all should miss the Super Bowl to hear our show, though. But we'll be there probably next Saturday at 6. Tomorrow we'll be on the parole board. And thank you for everybody.